All right, everybody, welcome to the Texas Select Custom Cutlery event. My name is Cowboy with Phoenix Knives. And those are the speakers. And maybe it could be that. So, we'd like to thank you all here. We're going to have some fun. We're going to start the morning with Eric Rivers and the Rivers Experience. Excellent hammerhead here. He can forge some blades and anything you want. Please ask me lots of questions, guys. Thank you all for being here.
So, is that volume good? What I do is I do a lot of this on YouTube. I teach people how to make knives and do things like that. The big thing for me is teaching people how to forge knives, because a lot of videos that you see on YouTube are people doing the stock removal version of it, where you're grinding everything away. For me, that's a lot of wasted material, so I want to get as close to the forge process as possible. I show people basically how to preform things to make their life easy, to go from like the piece of steel I have in there, to this, to this, to this, to an actual blade, based on preforms and making your life easier during the forging process. There's a lot of things that you can do to make everything so much easier on you, and teaching people how to not more or less wear themselves out while they're forging, because a lot of people want to get into this, they forge their first knife and they're like, oh, I'm miserable now, because their whole entire body is sore from doing it. There's a lot of ways that you can do this without having to worry about that. But on top of that, we're just going to have fun forging something. Whenever you're doing this, if I'm going to wear a glove, it's only ever going to be on the tongue hand, not on this hand. You build your calluses and everything on this end, so you don't have to worry about that. If you're going to get into this, I don't suggest you ever wear a glove on the hand that your hammer is going to be in. Always just get your hand used to doing what you're going to be doing with it. Call it done. I am going to be using several different types of hammers. One of the sponsors of my channel is two Basterds. They're actually the burgundy tint over there, so a lot of the different hammers that I use are made by them, and love them. And then I've got a couple of bigger hammers that people don't typically want to swing, but this makes your life a lot easier if you get used to swinging 4.5, 5 pound hammer, and we go and swing a 2-pound hammer, it feels like nothing. So I will be using this at the initial point and bringing everything down. What I'm going to do, we're going to start forging in the tips of the blades. So this is going to be the initial preform. We do this phase right here. So we want to turn it from the steel that we have right now to this. That's going to be our tip. And we want to get that knocked out, go quick. I am going to be forging fully the profile, the bevels, tapers. It's going to be a knife when it's something that you would grind a whole bunch of way to turn it into a knife. So, we're starting off with 2-inch tall stock. So this is about 9 inches long by 2 inches by 3/16 of an inch thick. And we got to take it and start forging in that tip. Come in, work that down. And just start bringing it down. You don't need to go too crazy at the beginning. We want the steel to start developing its heat. As we start thinning it out, as we start bringing those things out, it's going to retain its heat longer. But once it starts changing color, just put it back in and let it heat back up. And then, of course, this is one of the first Anvils I've ever forged on that had suspension. So, typically, whenever you're forging, you're on a concrete slab or you're using a big old stump that's set in the ground. As I'm hitting, it's moving the trailer. So, it's a little bit different. And this Anvil, this is actually the new Anvil that you can get from Texas Farrier Supply. This is the J. Nielsen design. So a lot of different things on it. Rounded edges back here. It's got a little section for finger choil built into it for knife making. Love it. As a matter of fact, Jay will be doing his anatomy of an anvil with that anvil after this. So as we do this, we're really going to start bringing that tip down. The two main parts that you end up really moving material on is forging the tip and then the initial transition into the handle area. That creates the heel and your tip. Those are the two main sections that you actually move a bunch of steel on. As I'm doing this, I don't try and make it look like a knife the entire time. I'm just getting the steel moved to the sections that it needs to get moved to so that I can then forge in bevels, refine the handle. One of the things that I see a lot of people waste heats on is cleaning the knife up the entire time they're forging, because they want it to look like a pretty knife the whole time. You don't need to do that. If you're working on the blade, don't worry about what happens to the handle. Just work on the blade. And then when you get to the handle part, don't worry about what happens to the blade. Just do the handle part. You'll planish it all together and smooth it all together at the end. There's no need to worry about messing anything up as you go. It is very interesting forging on a trailer. Like this is
1084 today? Just 1084 you're using?
This is 26C3. So it's one of those skills where I use it for chef's knives and different things like that, but I've actually been using it in my EDCs lately. It's nice because we can actually finish an EDC at like a 64 Rockwell on the edge and still be able to temper it, have good wear resistance, still have good workability on it without breaking it.
Heat treat about the same as 1084?
Yes, very, very similar. A little bit more with soak time, not as much as like a 1095 where you gotta keep it in there and let it soak for about 5 minutes. Get about 2.5 minutes soak time, quench it. Very, very, very easy. But the nice thing about 26C3 is it creates one of the crispest harmonies. So if you clay the spine, quench it, there is going to be a defined line exactly where your clay was. So whenever you sand it, it almost looks like a sand mine. Like it's awesome. And the auto harmonies that you get, like I've got a couple on the table right now in there that have the auto harmon, chef knife. That's purely just what the steel did on its own whenever I quenched it, and it looks awesome. That's the reason why I like it, because whenever you get that harmon in there, that's just an extra design that you didn't have to do anything with. It's just going to do its thing and it's going to look cool. And you gotta love whenever you're doing this. I mean, it looks like that through the first few heats because you're doing 2 inches. If I had like a 1.5 inch, 1.25 steel, it would already have a tip on it. But whenever you're taking 2 inches and bringing it down, there's a lot of moving. These tongs that I'm using here, these fancy, not fancy things, or specifically for 2-inch stop. That is a pair of snips with angle iron folded over, welded to the front of it. Because whenever I'm doing 5160 2-inch, you gotta get after it. These are great, but even with that, you'll start bending these out a little bit. So made these specifically for that.
I kind of thought, so I've never seen a pair like that.
Yeah, I thought about.
That's a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, I thought about making them and selling them, but people keep telling me that and I never do it.
Great idea.
But it's nice because your steel is not going to flip out of it at all. Because as you forge, it pushes back into it. This water is flying around in here. So how much is the trailer moving whenever I'm doing this?
Not too much. It's kind of pretty much going up and down a little bit.
Good.
It's good advertising for the trailer company, you know.
I know. The suspension on this, yeah, you can forge on top of this thing. Yeah. So the cool thing about this is once you get past this particular phase in it, and it actually starts looking like a knife, it really goes fast from there. Like once you just get the material, move to its spots, it's a lot quicker. And of course, it's even quicker whenever you're doing two at once. The largest amount that I've done to date is 10 knives at one time with the forge. So having 10 pieces of steel in there, forging them and doing that in an hour and a half. Those of course are EDCs, but at the Texas Custom Knife Show, I did 4, and one of them, I was there for 3 hours to forge. I forged all the knives in the first like hour and 45 minutes, and then I told him to go get a piece of steel. He go gets a 3/8 inch thick piece of 1095 by 1 foot and like almost 2 inches tall, and he's like, here you go. So I made a cutlery about that long out of it. Yeah, that was a lot of movement. This is 3/16 of an inch. That was a very big piece of steel. Okay, and I'll flip it over. So on the next heat, I'll be forging with the spine down, because this is going to end up being the spine. This is going to be the cutting edge. You drop it down so that when you forge in your bevels, it brings it back up and creates a drop point. Now, there's going to be 2 different preforms, because one of these is going to be a drop point, the other one's going to be a boom. So that preform on one where it's curved down, that becomes a drop point. Where you do almost a sat, where you just go at an angle, straight angle down, you forge in the bevels, and it actually creates a clip point naturally. So it's another one of those things that you don't have to end up grinding into the process. You can just forge everything in, and then if you only have to remove 1/8 of an inch of material around it, you know you did good. All we got to do is just bring in that hump in a little bit, and we'll have that tip pre-formed in there. And the whole point behind me switching the tongues like this is because I did not put really long tines on this one. And whenever you get your hand that close to the forge, it's spicy. One of the things that you'll see me do as I'm doing this, my hammer is hammering in one spot. I'm moving the steel the whole entire time. I'm not chasing this. As a matter of fact, if you look at the anvil, everything has happened in this spot. We just keep moving the steel like you're a power hammer and you're going one spot. The whole point behind that is the consistency with your hammer blows. So if you want to do brute to forge or forge to finish, you can't have those weird hammer hits where you accidentally come down with the corner of this and put a big dent. You put a big dent, you got to bring everything down to the depth of that dent. So especially if you're working with 3/16 of an inch stock, you start making an 1/8 inch thick knife real quick if you aren't controlling your hammer strikes, and especially if you're using a 4.5 pound hammer. If you hit something wrong with this, it's in there.
Yeah, Mr. Rose, so the question I had was, your hammer almost looks like it's rounded on both sides.
Yes,
So
so
it's like a modified flat hammer, and you get more action from it as far as moving the metal.
yes,
Versus
so
the flat side.
I use this primarily for the initial crushing of the steel, putting everything in its spots, and then I'll fine tune everything with the other hammers. But yes, this still has,
How many ounces is that?
this is a 4.5 pound. And this has a slight radius to the center here. It's not perfectly flat like my other hammers that have a flat side. And then this is the same radius as a softball on the round side. So whenever you want to, let's say I want to draw a heel, I don't want to put a huge dent into it, use this side. Whenever I hit it, it's going to create a big wide dent. And it's going to move the material super fast. If I'm coming in, this is a turning hammer. You come in like that, it has a little bit finer round to it, you're going to put a small little dent into it. Or let's say you use a ball peen. And there's going to be moments that you would use this, a lot of isolation, pulling out small sections, things like that. But like with this, I have to be careful with how hard I hit with that. Because of how broad this is, it's not going to, boom, put a real big, little tiny dent into it. This right here, if I hit this with the same strength as I hit this, even though this is only about a 1.75, it would put a big dent. But a very small circle, deep dent into it. The same reason why you have a narrow cross peen or a fat cross peen, depending on what you're trying to do. This puts a broad section in there. This puts a narrow section. A lot of the different hammers come for different reasons, isolating what you're trying to do with the hammer at that specific time. I'm going to take this and I'm going to take that and bring it down. A little bit of planishing. I don't need to have a ton of heat in here to do this because I'm not moving a bunch, but that gives you your preform on your point. What I do now is I get an idea of how much material I'm going to need for my handle for the Tang, because we're going to be forging the full Tang. This is 2 inches tall. If I want a 4.5 inch handle, and I'm going to take this and decrease it by about half. I know I can take that, and say I put 2.5 inches, I take that 2.5 inches, move it back, and that's going to give me my full size handle. So I know that I need to come in about 2.5 inches, eyeball it, good old eye tape measure, come in, hit it on the edge, and just create a little notch. And that's going to let me know whenever I come in and I start forging that section of where I need to start, and that's going to create my heel and my finger choil. Now, I can take and put this in Tang side in. And the next step we do on that one is isolating the transition between the Tang and the actual handle. I'm going to do that same process on this. Only difference is on this one, we're going to have the preform for the buoy. So where that one has a round nose, this one's going to have a straight cutoff. Leave that one more time and straighten that out. What's up? So this guy right here, he actually does a event that we do in November, October, November, every year called the Dragon Forge Experience. It's an event down by Houston at a place called Todd, Michigan. It's the Texas Renaissance Fair. We actually smith where the forges are dragons. So the mouth of the dragon is the forge. We can make them spit fire, all kinds of stuff. But we do that, and people can come in, kind of how they have the experiences down here, where you forge your horseshoe knives and things like that. So people can forge railroad spike knives, horseshoe knives, things like that. We grind them, they get a sheath, the whole entire thing. It's a pretty cool experience. And it's all at a Renaissance fair, and we're dressed kind of like he is. The kilt, the boots, different shirts.
Unless they pay $20.
And then there's no shirts. Yep, that's a thing that happens actually pretty often. Okay. So that I can end up switching tongs, I'm gonna go ahead and just finish the preform on this one. And again, the whole point behind creating a flat preform on this is so that whenever we forge in the bevels, it picks up the tip and creates that clip point. That way it's more of a straight line. And then we're going to go again about 2 inches, 2.5 inches. And a lot of this, whenever we're doing this process, you have to be able to really measure it by eye what you're going to need. Because if you're doing brute to forge or forge to finish or any of that, you don't get the luxury of taking and stock removing everything off. You know, whatever you forge, that's really what you're going to get. So my brute to forge knives that I have in there, their plunge lines are maybe about 2 thou deep. It's forged all the way down to its cutting edge. Okay, so now I'm going to grab the box jaw tongs and switch it with these. So we're going to forge that transition. Whenever you're doing this, I'll show y'all. So when you're going to do this step right here, the most important part about this is the Tang goes on top of the Anvil. What's going to be the Tang has to be up there. If you do it like this, which you see some people do that, you're going to have to do more work drawing out your heel. So the whole point behind this is you want your heel to push past the side of the anvil whenever you're compressing this material. That way you don't have to worry about messing with that section later. You want to do the least amount of work possible while still being cool. So forge down, you go half on, half off strikes. So on the anvil, we're going to have half the face off the anvil, half the face on. We're going to come in, forge that down, and compress that section to create what's going to be the finger sword. And that way, whenever you work the heel, you barely got to bring things down, and you don't have to worry about having to mess with stuff later.
Why did you mark it when the steel was folded? So you didn't get folds?
I didn't want it to do much to it. I just wanted to have the actual identification mark, but I didn't want it to I-beam. I didn't want to have to fix something because I just need it there for where it's going to be so that I'm not wasting the time with the heat trying to measure and do that. I want to do a pull it out, know where I'm going to go, boom, start hitting it. So I got my mark right there, and then start forward. You want to make sure that you are flattening it back out as you do this process, because what's going to happen is, as you're compressing it, it's going to want to I-beam this really bad. So it's going to want to fold and mushroom both edges out. And then what happens is, if you're not paying attention to it, and you're not pushing that back down, you're not trying to flatten it perfectly, but if you don't push those sections back down, whenever you go through and you fold it down here and you hit it, it's going to fold that I-beam, that lip comes off the edge, it's going to fold that onto the steel. And if you're doing, again, root and forge or a forged finish, you can't have that, because what happens is whenever you go and you grind away the profile a little bit, it's going to grind away the little section connecting that fold. And what you're going to have is you're going to have a dent where that steel forged over into itself. And if that's in your tang, you either got to grind the tang smaller, or you got to do a distal taper, or you got to do something, because you can't have that. You want your tang to be perfectly flat so you don't have openings in between your scales and your tang. So you just got to be paying attention to all those little small things so that you don't cause yourself more work down the road. Go back to our notch. So you might be noticing that I'm not using a brush to brush off the forge scale or anything like that. For one, 26C3 doesn't create a whole bunch of scale that stays on there. It wants to flake off a whole lot, which I love. Two, whenever you're doing a brute to forge finish, as long as you're keeping your hammer strikes nice and even, and you're keeping it clean, it's the scale that's going to end up coming off. Whenever you clean it up, it's going to create the texture, not your hammer marks. That's what I like. I want it to, whenever I clean the scale off, that leaves that cool topographical map texture on the actual blade, not all of your cross pins and straight pins. Because a lot of brute force knives, you see all the hammer marks. I don't want you to see almost any hammer marks. I want you to just see a cool texture. So, especially if you're doing a chef's knife, the only depth of that texture is a few thou. So you're not going to get a bunch of food particles in there or mess anything up. see it'll just start compressing itself. I'm not worried about what happens to this section of steel at all. It can go wherever the heck it wants. All I'm focused on right now is creating that transition. Part of that makes your life easier later, because if you don't focus on the Tang, it lets you skip a step whenever you finish the profile. So y'all see that. So I talk about it a lot whenever I say, don't worry about what happens to different parts of the steel. So whenever you transition between this profile to this by forging in the bevel, whenever you draw this out, it of course elongates this side, stretches it to this. What ends up happening is, you turn this into a banana, this piece of steel works its way up out of the way. As you're doing that, because you're stretching this edge and it's moving everything out this way and this way. A lot of people will go and take the handle and keep pulling it down as they go. You want to do that, let it go out of the way, forge your bevels, and then whenever you take and you correct the profile, it gives you a nice section right here and a heel that pulls back a little bit, so you barely have to remove anything to create that fair soil, but it creates a nice knife and you're not having to pull the heel back at all, which is one of those things you typically have to isolate. If you just do this and let the handle go out of its way, get everything good, and then lay this down and move that up, it automatically creates that tight radius without you having to try and forge in there. And I will angle. That's where it comes into place where you're not trying to correct everything the whole entire time you're forging. You're just trying to put in the work, get everything to go where it needs to go. Okay, so this is where it needs to be. I'm cool with that right there. I wanted to make it slightly taller. I can do that later. What I want to do now is create what's going to be the pinky choil. This section, back here, where that little bird's beak. So, in order to make sure I have enough steel to do that, we come in about ½ inch, create another little notch. And we're going to do the same process that we just did on the other side of the anvil and forge in another wedge like that back here. What you're going to see, what happens is, by doing that process, you get that swell. You actually just get that palm swell right off the bat. So let's just say you only did that much work to a Tang. Well, I took a piece of steel at the last show that would have been ground out of this and forged the whole entire knife. That knife's on my table out there. And just to show, if I was to grind that away, I wouldn't have a $250 knife on my table right now. So just that little section of steel that people don't think about, they go in there and they rip it off with the 36 grit belt, cost you $250. which is wild. That's a lot of money for just saving a couple of minutes. I'm gonna bring that down just a I'm good with that. About half an inch again. There's a notch. So the cool thing about this is whenever you go in and you just forge just this, again, if you just forge that and then did your bevels, you automatically have for the most part a mount profile. Because this right here, you can easily just grind away a little bit and you're good. If you took an 1/8 of an inch to a 1/4 of an inch off some of these little sections, you're perfect. There are some knives that actually that just fits people's hands. So you don't have to technically go past that. Just me personally, just a little extra steps really cleans up a profile so you barely have to take a 1/16 to an 1/8 off of that to have a comfortable knife handle without having to do all the extra grinding. And I'll tell you, the cost of belts hasn't gone down. Belts are expensive. Ceramic belts, that's a lot of money.
You point out the cost, I just hate grinding.
Right? Creating dust all over your shop. So we're gonna do that same thing. I am forging on the outside of the anvil, but I still, same process. I want the part that's gonna be that little bird's beak to be the part that goes past the side of the anvil. And you'll see that it'll just start creating a little beak on there. So whenever I first started doing this, there was a little bit more time between the steel heating up. As we forge it and as we do this, it's not going to take near as much time to be able to get to that point. You can see, we got our little section segmented out. What's going to be that bird's beak. Started doing that little swell. I'm not going to bring it down much more than that because I'll start messing with that whenever we get to the final profile. this point, on this one, I want to bring it down just a little more, and then I want to start elongating that handle. Same thing for this. So when we go through and we want to start elongating the handle, it's actually really easy. Instead of going hammering half on, half off, we just come in a little bit, forge more on top of the anvil, and start compressing the section that is in here. Here and here. Pull that in. We'll do the same thing on the back. The part that's going to be up towards that finger soil, compress that in. At this point, I'm not trying to make it look like a knife still. I just want to compress those. I don't care what transition it looks like, any of that. We're still in the just moving the material phase, not in the trying to make it look pretty phase. So more on the anvil, bring that down. Now we got that section right there. Come back over to the area that's going to be the finger soil. And we start getting our rough profile of that handle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the handle to about 75% done, then go back to the blade, really work on those, and then come back and work on the handle after that. You just want to get them to a certain point. Figure out roughly on the anvil that fits your hand. Okay, so I'm good right now with the leaving that handle. So I barely have to work on that at all. It'll just be refining it, cleaning it up, and flattening it later. Handle's good where it's at on this one. I'm not going to make it look any prettier than that yet. At that point,
Aaron, quick question now.
yeah.
Once you get done with your handle, before you start, you may have already covered this, and I may have just not even listening. But do you actually go ahead and put the reverse banana in before you do the bevel?
Yes, so we always, well, and it kind of depends. If you preform it right, you don't really have to do the reverse banana, but like that right there, this is how it is. And what he asked was, whenever I get to this point, do I do the reverse banana? Meaning, do I take this and kind of drop it down so that whenever I forge in the bevels, it brings it back up? On a drop point knife, you really only need to come down about that far. And then whenever I stretch this out, it's going to take this tip and bring it roughly to about center of here. But on like the buoy, whenever I do that, this is a straight line. It's not arched like this, it's straight. So that the section up here is thinner, and what it does is it creates a hook, creates that clip naturally just developed into it from the forging process. But yeah, if you, let's say you wanted to do a cutlery, you got to do several preforms on that because you got to have the drop and you got to be able to have the belly. So there's a bunch of different things for that. On that one, you take and you drop it from about where that center section is here, the part of the cutlery that actually gets where the tip drops to. You leave that where it's at and you really drop the tip down. You belly, it brings everything back up, but you still have the drop of the poo-poo. So, again, that's another preforming process so that you don't have to spend more work later. So there we go. Okay, so that handle is the length that I need. You go ahead and start working on the blade side. And at this point, if I want to, I'll take and I'll correct the profile a little bit so I'm not having to correct too much later, I guess you could say. So if the Tang is going to be, if it's going to come up too far during it, I might drop it down a little bit so that it makes sense for what's going to happen to the next step later. And y'all will see that as I'm doing this. So like right now, if I left that where it's at and I forged in bevels, this thing is going to really hook off. So I need to take and just bring it down a little bit. The easiest way to do that, you put your blade on the top of the anvil, use your little ledge, and just forge right on the inside of that handle. Y'all will see me do that later to actually correct the profile, but that brings it down just a little bit so that it does what I need to do later. So this is the one that's going to be the buoy. Bring this down. And while I still have heat in it, I really want to straighten up this preforming. So it just has a straight edge on it. One of the things to also focus on, if you got a forge and you're doing this inner forge, whenever you are putting your steel back in the forge, make sure you're putting the steel to the wall, not in the center of the forge, so your burner is not blowing directly on the steel. You'll burn the steel super fast if you just slap it in there and let that flame just go straight in the center of where it's going to be. Ribbon burner forges like this are nice because it's a bunch of really small flames. So forced air, and there's a whole bunch of holes in here, so all the little flames are tiny. Love that aspect of this, and you can run it on lower PSI. All right, so for this process, I'm not doing the bevels yet. I want to just clean up the profile. Clean up the profile. Make sure everything is a uniform thickness. So that we don't have to correct anything later. Now, of course, you'll be able to planish it. And you'll see, as I'm planishing, I'm going to be in this heat right here. I'm not going to be, it's not going to be glowing or anything like that. I need it to be a little bit cooler so that as I hit it, it just flattens and it doesn't put a big dent. At this phase, you don't want a big dent in there because you got to fix it. And with the brute to forge knife, there are some people that will sacrifice the finish quality of it because it's a brute to forge knife. Shouldn't do that. You should be able to have the texture and have the cool look of it being forged while still having a clean Tang, clean spine when you look down it. You shouldn't have a bunch of dents down your spine. You should have nice shoulders going from your spine down into your flats. It should be clean. Don't sacrifice your fit and finish for the aspect of a group forge. So you're going to see as I do the blade, I'm not going to do near as much of what I just did. I got it to that point. I know that I'm starting with a nice flat piece of steel. I don't need to go through and planish it the whole entire process moving forward. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and start forging the bevels on the kind of drop point camp knife, the switch hammers. So for this one, you can use a few different hammers. I tend to use that speaker. Okay. I'll use either the two Basterds dog head. Some people wonder why the heck you use that speaker with a hammer. I like it because it puts my hand a little bit away from the anvil. So if I have to forge here, my knuckles aren't touching anything. But I like it because the index is really nice. All the weight is on the side that you're hitting with. There's nothing back here. It's all just personal preference on a lot of that, but I like this hammer a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to forge in my bevels using it. It's a little bit, still a big head, but it doesn't have the big radius. It's actually flat more on the inside here, and it doesn't have as much of the, almost both of those sides are almost a rounding hammer from the round side. But we've got a few different hammers. That's a rounding hammer. This is more like a traditional blacksmith style rounding hammer right here. Flat side, round side, some marked wing. And then you have this right here is a turning hammer. It's a Farrier's hammer. Also again, round, flat. Love this hammer. This is a vintage hammer that two Basterds has with their vintage line. Okay, so whenever we forge in the bevels, you can do this a few different ways. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you all a cheating way to do it. So, if you want to do this, and you want to do it quick and easy, round side. So, take the round side of your rounding hammer, and just forge the bottom third of the blade. Don't focus on anything else. We're going to take the round side of this hammer, we're just going to take and forge just that bottom section, and it will start bringing everything in. Now, one of the things that you see that I do different than some people, whenever some people are forging in their bevels, or come over to the edge of the anvil and forge in, part of that is so that they don't risk hitting the face of their anvil. If you use a round side of your hammer, you're not going to be hitting the face of your anvil because that round edge right there isn't going to come in contact with the anvil. Plus, you do the work really quick. Now I'll tell you, if you're going to do this process, you need to be comfortable using your hammers because you are putting deep bends all the way down. So you got to be paying attention to not forge it too thin. But this is a light hammer. Shouldn't really have to worry about that. But it is something that you got to focus on. For me, I can use this. I can use this. This is a straight peen hammer. So if I wanted to forge in the bevels with it, I have enough confidence in myself to forge with a straight peen all the way down. and elongate while still creating that bevel all the way down. Because what happens whenever you do this is you're creating peaks and valleys. You're getting the length because the round hammer or that straight pin are creating a bunch of peaks and valleys. You put a bunch of dents down it, and then whenever you push the top material down, you get length. So that's what you're doing during this whole process. You can do it with the flat side of the hammer, and a lot of, careful with that speaker, and a lot of people do that, but this does make it faster. But the compressing is still a lot quicker than doing that, but it is a little more difficult, I guess you could say, because with that, you're not going to risk putting big dents in it as you go. Once you get used to using the hammers, you're going to build up the confidence in being able to do it. Like right now, the next one, I'll use that hammer. Hello. This forge from these wonderful people right here. They are right down there, and it is an awesome forge. Same thing, treat yourself like a power hammer. You are moving the steel, keeping yourself in the same position, and you'll start stretching that out the same way. Now again, whenever I'm doing this, if I'm using a straight side like this, I'm gonna have it angled like this. It's gonna be angled towards the anvil, and on some of them, I'm actually gonna be angling my steel with it so that I'm pinching from both sides. So instead of having this completely flat and moving that edge off to one side and then having to correct it, I'm angling it like this where I'm just pinching the edge and I'm not creating chisel. If I have it flat and I start moving that edge down, I'm pushing it this way and I'm going this way, pushing it this way. If I go through and angle the steel as I go, it's going to keep that edge centered as I go through doing this. And again, it's another step that I don't have to try and correct later. And just for consistency, we'll switch back to the turning hammer on this one. And by the end of this, you shouldn't see hardly any of these hammer strikes. Start thinning that edge out, start bringing this up. Again, I'm not worried about the tip being perfect right now. I'll go through and clean that up whenever I finish working on the spine. So I haven't even forged in the distal towards the tip on this yet. I'll end up doing that in the finish work. So I'll pull that tip out and I'll get probably about another 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch of length by forging in the distal from about halfway down the blade to the tip. Again, that's going to keep you from having to grind that steel off later. And it's cool because it keeps your forge texture all the way up to the tip, which looks really cool. And then with this one, what'll end up happening is you'll gradually start creating a little curve and thin that out. And again, I'm not worried about what's happening to the Tang right now. If I was to go through and try and correct the profile, and that gets into people's head to where they have to make it a knife looking thing the whole time. They want to pull that back down because they're like, oh, I gotta fix it. You don't need to. I'm now working the second third up the bevels. And with this one, because I'm using the straight peen, the difference between this and that whenever I moved up to the second of the thirds, the second layer, because I'm using that round part of that, I can just isolate in that section. With this, in order to get up to that second third of that, I need to decrease the angle. And that way I'm putting the hammer actually onto that section of the steel. So I'm not moving the hammer up higher on the blade. I'm not forging up here. It's just bringing it down. And we start, again, bringing that up. And you can see the lines, the little valleys, are up in this section up here that go all the way up to here. You can see those lines come all the way up into that section right there. But we're not touching this area at all yet, because we're going to mess with that whenever we finish the profile. Back down to the bottom third. So right now, on the next heat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to refine that tip a little bit, but you can see how thin we are on the edge right now versus the spine.
Do you recommend having it go thinner than a dime, or you go ahead and even make it thinner than that?
So it really depends on the steel. So on what he asked was, do I want to bring it down to a thickness of like a dime on the edge? Certain steels create a whole lot of decarb, like ABCRB2. They need to be left a little bit thicker because the amount of decarb that goes through the blade is pretty deep. If you have it the thickness of a nickel or a dime, well, nickel's okay. If you have it the thickness of a dime, you're going to have to cut away a whole bunch of the edge to get up to that hard steel and burn that decarb. So something like 26C3, I can quench this at the thickness of a dime, and it's going to be perfectly straight. Like I said, it's going to happen for everybody, because somebody might swirl it like this whenever they're quenching, but it's going to be straight, and it's not going to have almost any decarb. So what I typically do once I quench, I will take and run just a Nicholson file down the edge and get rid of the decarb layer, and then I'll check it. Because you want to get rid of that little thin layer of decarb, especially on like 10 series steel ADCRV2, some of the ADCRV2 is just a version of 10 series with chromium and vanadium. So it's going to have basically the same process. But on 15 and 20, yeah, you can bring it all the way down to 57 dime and quench it. It'll be fine. 1084, about the, almost the same. I mean, you can bring it down to that pin if you want to, but I would suggest about the nickel, just so that you don't risk getting that bacon edge whenever you quench it, which you got to fix later. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to the flat side of this hammer. And I'm going to push those little peaks down. Good there. I still need to bring that edge thickness down a little bit, so I'm not done with that part yet. I am going to switch to the turning hammer, and I'm just going to stretch out just the edge, and it's really going to bring this tip up on that. So now we're going to come in, we're going to refine that profile, flat side. Turn this way so y'all can actually see it. One of the things you'll see that I'm doing is that I'm not forging onto the edge. I'm leaving the edge on the anvil and I'm forging on the spine. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to put more dense and mess into the spine where it's thicker and not risk pulling the edge over, like hitting on that edge and bending it over. Less stuff is going to happen on the anvil side every single time. It's going to be more flattening than anything. But we're getting pretty good there. Just need to refine that a little bit and then we'll work on the handle. So, break that just a little bit, then bottom edge. We can see, we have that brought up. Now, of course, everything's going to make more sense when I finish doing everything. You see here, this gill hasn't been dropped down. What I'm going to do on the next heat is I'm going to pull that and just isolate that section. So this is going to be the buoy. Yep. What I love is the people that don't live in Texas they call buoys bowies. It's a bowie. It's not a bowie. It's a buoy. Buoy. If you haven't been to Bowie, Texas, they have the world's largest buoy in Bowie, Texas. And it is huge. Absolutely huge. And it's actually steel with wood scales on it. They're like a tree that was cut in half. I mean, the scales are like that tall. The handle's about that big around. It's crazy. But yes, it is a buoy, not a bowie. A little bit of planishing at a low heat. I'm looking pretty good there. So what I'm gonna do at this point on this one is I'm gonna go ahead and switch to the Tang and get that about 90% done. And then I can finish off the blade after that. Because right now, anything that I do to the blade at this point is not really gonna move or modify the profile. Because it's just gonna be fine little adjustments. It's not gonna shift something over an inch whenever I'm planishing and cleaning things up. So I'm gonna grab it from the blade side, go back to the handle, get in the same point so that all the rest of the abuse is done, and it's just cleaning up a profile, planishing, making things look pretty and smooth. So I'm gonna bring this heel down. All I'm gonna do is grab my little ball peen.
Drawing the heel down, right?
So that brings this section down. Now, again, you don't want to do that at a super high heat because those hammer blows are going to put big dents in there. I want to be able to use this side of this hammer and just planish that out, clean it up. That head's 36 years old. Got that from my dad.
Eric, I've noticed the heat, turn the heat down on the forge too, haven't you?
Yep.
It's not what you started off with.
Yeah, because you don't need it to be that hot right now.
Not replenished.
No. And right now, even with the stuff that I'm about to do to the Tangs, really all we're doing is just fine tuning them, cleaning them up. My goal with the Tang is I want people to grab it and hold it whenever I'm done forging and go, okay, well, that's a comfortable handle by itself. There are knives that I do that are 100% steel. I beam the handles and do all of that, and I'll forge the whole entire thing. So even the radiuses on the spine, everything's all hammer finished. That way the only thing that a grinder touches is maybe bevels or just the edge. On this one, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the ball peen, and I'm going to work in this back section here. I'm going to end up pushing that out and creating a little distal taper. I have no clue what we're at time-wise. Cool. So we're good. Okay. Cool. Perfect. Go to the other side. Just ball peen. Just clean up those hammer strikes. And now we got our hill dropped down a little bit. Now, of course, the profile is going to end up changing whenever I start doing that particular process on this. As of right now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead, work on the handle, and I'll come in and refine that profile a little bit up there. Bring in that pinky oil. So what I'm going to do, when it comes to the pinky tool and the little bird's beak, that little guy, that's going to be worked on the horn, and then different parts of the handle as we go. Heat that Tang up a little bit. What's cool is whenever you get to the actual profiling of this, it starts to look really, really cool because it's like, by the time you're done forging, that is a knife. So I'm going to bring that little beak forward on this one. This is the one that I was just hitting a second ago with the ball peen in this section. So I had a little extra thickness and I wanted to move just that section out into here. So I just used the ball peen in this little area and isolated that material out this way instead of this way. And I got to the thickness that I wanted to be. Getting used to what your hammers do to the steel when you're isolating things is a big part of this process. You can watch people do this on TV or YouTube as much as you want, but until you actually swing a hammer, it's hard to really see what's going to happen. Doghead hammer, I'm going to come in and just forge this section right here down a little bit. Come back to where there's a slight radius on the side of this. And that's going to clean up that little edge right there. So it's one less thing that you got to grind. And what it does is it puts the initial swell, the indent, where this taper comes in and then goes to the heel of the knife, or the butt of the knife. And we end with a really cool profile on the handle. Come over to the area that has your index finger side. Same thing. Bring that down. If you notice, on this, it has this hump towards the hand side. What ends up creating the actual, kind of like a diamond on there, is whenever I take and I move this hump and I adjust it and push that hump in, I move it to the spine side. Now, of course, before we do that, we're going to end up correcting the profile just a little bit. Working this one just a bit more. How are you feeling? Good. Well, my wife got into a drinking competition last night.
First of all, not bad.
I just got elbowed in the ribs. She heard me say that out loud. No need to really rush this particular part of this. You want everything to look real nice at the end of it. And what I'm doing is I'm forging primarily on the edge of this, and I'm just pushing this section up into that and up into that. And because my spine's not touching the anvil, it will take and kind of start transferring a little hump onto there.
Thing I struggle with right now.
Oh yeah. So you'll see, the nice thing is, whenever I take it out, whoop, the heel is already where it needs to be. Right now, I'm just trying to transfer the profile a little bit so that again, I don't have to do as much of that work later in there. No, but if I'd have just did one, we'd have had too much downtime. Okay, so now I want to take and upset it just a little more. So I'm going to put the end of the Tang up on the ledge. Still hammering in the same exact spot. I'm not worried about this little bump here. All I'm trying to do is get my Tang where I want it to, where it's a nice finished profile when it's all said and done. Whenever I go through and move everything around, this little divot is going to go away. And you can see, just by where we're at right now, what a lot of people have issues with is bringing the heel down and have it not, a lot of the times when people forge in the heel of the plate, it will want to roll all the way forward. So this section wants to be all the way up here, and you got to try and pull it back to fill that gap that's underneath where your finger is up in that joint. And that's not easy for a lot of people to do. But if you forge it this way to where you actually just let that Tang go all the way up into nowhere land, and then you correct the profile after it, it automatically creates that tight angle right there. So now I want to clean up the profile a little bit. And then here, a little bit of hammer. Find which part of the anvil you want to use. I don't like any of those, so I'm just going to do it a different way. I'm working on right now is I'm going to be just moving the handle down again to get rid of this little section right there. You don't want that hump in there. And part of it will go away whenever I do the distal taper on that. Same thing with this. And all I'm doing is I'm coming in and making my plunge go all the way up to the spine here. And that's filling in that little area. And it's moving my tang down. Now, straight beam down the spine. We're getting less and less of a hump there. And again, all I'm doing is I'm using the steel that I left at the beginning of preforming. So if you remember, I didn't touch the spine at all when I was forging in the bell, wasn't doing any of that. So now I've got all this material that I can correct whatever I want with. And again, how forging works, you move the material to some other direction. So if you just know where the material is going to go when you hit it at a certain angle with a certain type of hammer, you can direct it wherever you want with the right hammer. Whether you're using a ball peen hammer, a straight peen, a cross peen, any of those things, you can push that material wherever you want depending on the hammer you're using. Right now what I'm doing is I'm using this straight peen and I'm putting a distal towards the tip, which means I'm putting a taper towards the tip, and what that's going to do is that's going to move material up and back down that spine. It's going to drop my tang down. Now that tang's a little bit high. It's going to drop my tip down. It's going to put an overall arch on it. Let's go ahead. Again, almost no dip in there. When we started, we were about, over a quarter of an inch of a dip in there. We didn't want that. And if you're going to do a clip point with a harpoon tip, you can leave that dip there because you're going to end up removing the material, creating a little harpoon, little lip cut for your sledge. That knife isn't going to have that, so I don't want that. You got to be very careful if you're doing this particular process with a straight beam or something like that, because again, wherever you put your valley, the deepest depth you go, that's the thickness that the knife needs to be at the end of it. So I'm not sitting here and dropping it from here and getting after it during this process. And then what I'll do on the last phase of that profile is I'll primarily just get the heat in the spine, and I'll do that last little doop and put an arch to it. The doop is a technical term. You know how it goes. It's a very blacksmithy. It's a doop. All I did there was I pulled down the edge by just using my hammer to soak out that heat, and that way that spine was still nice and hot. And whenever I hammered on the edge, it didn't really deform it at all. As you can see now, whenever I take that handle and drop it down just a little bit, we're going to be a nice, clean profile. All right. Move that in. Go ahead and replenish the Tang. Now, to be fair, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing right now isn't necessary if you're going to go ahead and start grinding from this point. This is going to be primarily coarse to finish, brute forge type phase of this. At this point, you can easily go through, grind the rest of that into a knife, call it good. Your edge is already thin, you got a rough profile, you can easily go through and grind wherever you want to that. You already have your clip, you already have a full profile. So it's not something that you have to go through and do the phase that I'm doing right now, but you want that cool brute forge thing, you gotta put in the extra work for it. And part of it's also just developing more skills as you go. You gotta do more and more work to develop the skills. Now I'll tell you, I tend to leave my tangs slightly thicker than the rest of the blade because whenever you go through and you surface grind them flat, or you go through and you bring them across your platen and you grind them down to roughly where your ricasso is. If your ricasso is super proud, and you come down on a 36 grit belt or whatever, it's going to kiss that forged texture as you do it. So you want to bring it down to that. Because you can just work it up, you bring your platen out a little bit proud of your wheels, work it down to it, work it down to it, work it down to it, and you'll flatten everything up to those ricasso area and not have to worry about it.
Is your handle pretty much all the same thickness all the way from the ricasso all the way back?
No, so the ricasso is going to be slightly thinner.
Slightly thinner.
Yep. Again, so that as you grind it, you flatten
You
it.
don't normally take it down towards
Oh.
the back, do you?
Yeah. If I'm going to have a distal taper all the way through it, yeah. If I did that on this, the handle would be about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch longer than what it is right now. But yeah, personally, I like doing distal tapers. And because I'm doing one knife tomorrow, I'll probably do distal tapers on it. I'm going to switch this up, and I'm going to start working on the blade actually. But you can see right now, that's the profile we're at with bevels and everything. I just need to go ahead, clean up the rest of the profile on that, and make it look even better. That's not going to take very long. I'm cool with that profile. A little bit of planishing. So now, I'm going to take it, I'm just going to distal that out a little bit more, get a little extra length. Straight peen. I want to distal it, but I really only want length. I don't want it height. If you were to do that with a rounding hammer or something like that, you're going to get 363 movement. It's going to get your height, length, everything. I just want length, and I'm already tall enough as it is right now for a blade. And you need to be careful doing that so that you're not messing up, putting too big a dents into it. Doing the distal same way on this one. You see, I'm not worried about I didn't drop that tip down at all. I still have enough edge thickness to bring that back up. We're only working on the spine right now, really. And this is why you only get them to a certain percentage while you're actually going through and forging. Not exactly what you would call a planishing hammer. Like the big wide face. So now we got our distal taper in there. And I still have a decent edge thickness. So whenever I go through and clean that up, we'll finish our profile. Sponsored by Pepsi. Technically, I work for them, so they do pay my paycheck. Absolutely. Thanks for the questions. Yeah. It's cool though, so you got it. So now on that cutting edge, start bringing the clip up. I'll refine that profile. Oh yeah. Same thing on this one, cutting edge. starting to look really good.
You're about out of time here.
Huh?
You're about out of time.
Good. We are pretty much done. We really don't need to go much further than that. There it is.
Shouldn't be a problem.
So there's that one. That has bevels, full buoy handle, the whole entire thing. And that's what we call a forged to finish there. I'm actually going to put this there. And this one, and that one. And that gets you to where you're pretty much ready to, at this point, these are both ready to heat treat and go ahead, drill your holes, heat treat, do all of that stuff, and you're pretty much done. Without having to go through and grind all of that away. And again, a lot of that's just focusing on preforms, not having to go through and worry about all the grinding work that you're going to do afterwards, not sacrificing material by grinding it away and throwing it away, being able to just forge whatever you need, bevels, profiles, everything. At that point, you can just go through, grind a little bit away, and you have your knives. Your heels are pulled down and pulled back, so that will come down below your finger in that finger tool area. It's not one of the ones that rounds out and washes away from your hand. And it's just focusing on what you can do with preforms, the right hammers. Nice and easy. Hopefully people learn something from this. But that's it on me. So, again, Anvil I use, this is the Texas Farrier Supply, Jay Nielsen Anvil. He's going to be talking about this Anvil whenever he does his, and tell you a little bit more about it, but this is the one that they designed. It's a very cool Anvil. A lot of small little things that are added into this that makes it really nice for knife makers, and he'll of course go through and tell you about that. And then hammers, 2 Basterds, Texas Smithy and Supply, under the burgundy tent over there. A lot of the hammers that I use by them. They have, of course, banner down here. Awesome thing. And then thank you to Cowboy and Neil for letting me come up here and do this thing. This was fun.
Thank you, Eric. You did a great job. Y'all give him a round of applause. All right, guys. Welcome to the event. My name is Cowboy with Phoenix Knives. We are the hosts of Texas Select Custom Cutlery event. We are just about to reset the stage real fast. Jay Nielsen, Forged and Fire Judge, is going to come up here. This anvil was designed by him specifically for use for doing blades and things like that. He's going to tell you all about it. I will be walking around letting you ask questions. We're going to take a couple quick pictures with him and let him get set up and ready to go. And we'll start doing that right after we finish doing the demonstration with Jay and Shelly. I've got some ballistic dummies back here. We're going to bring out some of the Forest and Fire guys, a couple of their blades. I think, Jay, you're going to join in on that, correct?
Oh, hell yeah.
So Jay's going to join in on one of them. So we're going to have a little head-to-head competition destroying ballistic dummies. They're right on the other side of the booth. They've been a huge sponsor of our events almost since the very beginning. So ballistic dummies is the coolest thing. You get to go out and cut these things up and watch them on TV. And we're going to give you a chance to actually, we're going to auction off one ballistic dummy and give one of y'all a chance to use the sword to come out here and tear up the ballistic dummy. So keep your pocketbooks out as soon as we finish all this.
I'm gonna let y'all watch Jay do his thing too.
Yeah, they only go for 60 seconds. So I gotta be
60 seconds, you posing it just like
no problem. You tell me when to hit the animal, just like resting on it. They said it's good pose. Now just do the pose and the smoke will come up and I'll try to get it. Yeah, I mean, it might be good to have the animal. I mean, I'll stand there. I'll try to. But yeah, we want to show off the animal. So I guess with the hammer man, look behind you. Sure. Here, turn it back on. He's not talking yet. We're going to focus for a second. Ready? I'm ready. I hope it ain't the gun.
Oh, it's blue. There you go.
Blue. It's like the Smurf.
All right, guys, y'all get to see what Hollywood's like here for a second.
Not as aggressive as I thought it would be. Maybe
It looks like you're on blue smoke after lunch. I was gonna say I need some tomatoes. So grab it.
yeah, put it right
Okay, right here.
This is the first time I've used these, so. Supposed to only go. That's about it.
Yeah, that stuff stinks.
Yeah,
Yes,
we'll see how they turn out.
You spit stuff all over the place when we get the crest.
Yeah,
I know.
I've never used these before, but maybe if we'd done it higher, you know, like not behind the handle or something.
We can try to get it a little longer for another half. Yeah, we can try to get it done a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Not that, it's just being right? Okay.
All right, guys, we got Jay Nielsen here. We want to give him a big round of applause. We want to thank Texas Farrier Supplies for being a big sponsor, Basterds for being a big part of this. And once again, thanks Eric Rivers for the Rivers experience earlier.
Yeah, let's give Eric another round of applause. That guy's a machine. He did great work. All right, so I ain't doing anything fancy here. The whole reason that Kelly and I came up with this idea is because the last year we've been doing a lot of traveling, doing a lot of like hammer-ins and actually hands-on events, you know, for vets, first responders and stuff like that. But one of the things I was noticing that almost nobody would use the horn of the anvil at all. Matter of fact, I'm sure you've seen some of those small block anvils that don't even have a horn on them. Guys were fighting over those. And I need bass lines. But that just got me thinking about that, because I would go up and down the line and kind of show them different things they could use on the anvil as opposed to just this 6-inch square of steel right there. That seems like what everybody's been focusing on. So I figured I'd just do a refresher on the anvils, even the silly stuff, which is one of the things which you don't have to worry about that as much in Texas, but in Pennsylvania and stuff like that, even something as simple as preheating your anvil. I have blocks of steel with a little piece of rebar stuck on them, and it's specifically for just preheating all my tools, and it's not just in the cold weather or anything like that. If I take this bar of steel, put it in that 4-inch heated up cherry red, do nothing to this anvil, as soon as I take it out and put it on that steel, 70% of that heat gets sucked out within 3 seconds. So warm your anvil up ahead of time. Take a bar of steel, take chunks, whatever you got, scrap steel laying around, put a handle on it, throw it in there. When you turn the forge on and you're heating your forge up, throw that piece of steel in there too. So when your forge is heated up, lay that on your anvil the same way you do on your dies, on your hammer, or on your forging press or anything like that. Everybody preheats the dies on those. This is your number one die in your shop right here. So preheat that as well. That makes a huge difference when you're working on steel. You want to have that steel, have that heat stand there for as long as you can before you have to put it on there and stand there and wait around again. So the quicker you can keep that momentum going, heating up with anvils helps a lot with that. The other thing too, as far as anvils, is the height. A lot of people will just throw it on a stump or something like that. And stumps are great. The only problem with stumps, it's really hard to get them dead flat on both sides. And the height of the anvil is actually very important. The standard rule is you make a fist at your side, and that's where the face of your anvil should be at that height. Sounds good. The reason for that, though, is because when you're forging, when you come down, you want that face to be dead flat on that anvil face. And doing the measurement with your hand at a fist on your side will basically give you what you want. If the anvil's too high and I go to hit, I'm going to be striking with the front corner or back crescent, back corner. Same thing if it's too low, I'll be hitting with the front. So anytime I'm not hitting flat on, dead on, I'm putting dings and depressions into my steel that I'm going to have to fix. So just something as simple as adjusting the height of the anvil properly can make a big difference on how much work you're doing and how much work you're going to have to do later. That also being said too, I don't like wearing gloves when I forge. I usually don't. I prefer, like Shelly's got, if I can, I prefer to avoid the tongs until later and just use large bars. Sometimes you'll have to wear a glove when it gets a little smaller, but at length it's usually not that big of a problem. The thing I like the glove for, thanks sir, after each pass of forging, there's going to be forged scale on the face of your anvil. That's what I use it for. So just wipe it off. Or leave a rag on the side of the anvil or something, because if you leave that scale on the face of the anvil, you go put a bar on there and whale into it, you're going to transfer imprints and dents into the bottom of that steel. And you're going to have to turn around and work that back out too. So wiping off your anvil every once in a while between each heat is a good way to keep things cleaner and keep you from having more work to do. This is actually what I use my glove for most of the time. So when I'm not using the horn of the anvil, when I'm through my thigh. The traditional thing is you want to be able to hold it a foot above the face of the anvil, and you want to clamp that into your hand. Hey! Good time. That was a win. So this does get bounce. If you're going around like state sales, or if you're looking for animals, the ball burning with you, that makes a big difference. The biggest thing about that bounce, and this will bring you back to magnets and chains and stuff. If the anvil doesn't have a good bounce, you're going to kill your shoulders. It's going to be a little loud. So usually when I'm starting to forge, I like hammers with long handles. I start at the bottom, and as the knife gets closer to being done, my hand gets closer to the head. So starting out, I'm not doing hardly anything. It's just the weight of the anvil and the bounce. I'm getting minimal pressure. You can see it dying down. Having that kind of bounce where the hammer springs back up at you saves you a lot of wear and tear in your shoulders. You got a dead anvil that doesn't bounce, and you got to swing, and it's going to stop, and then you got to pull it back up every time. And you guys saw Eric so many times to pick that hammer up and swung it around. Having to work twice as hard like that is a big problem. So no matter what kind of anvil you get and you're looking for, even the ones you have at home, check them out, see which one works the best. Take the one with the best range, use that as your main. But you want to not have to work very hard. You let that anvil do the work. Just like the power hammer or press. You let that do the work, you let this do. You see a lot of times people that are starting out and they're doing this. They're running like a cycle. And it's just tearing things up. You don't need to use your elbow that much when you start. And like I said, for me, as I do it, as I'm forging the blade, as I'm getting, I need a little more detail, just careful not to bang the soil, not to sponges around. I'll start moving my hand up the hammer a little bit more, to the point where I'm almost at the head of the hammer on time. Anybody have any questions on anvils so far? Or any of the stuff I talked about?
If y'all get questions, please let me know, signal me, or we'll walk up so we can get questions.
And this demonstration is kind of question heavy, because there's only so much stuff I can talk about with these anvils. But it's a lot of basic information that seems to have been missing lately. And next year we're actually talking about doing a panel with a bunch of people for making hammers, forges, all kinds of stuff, so you can answer questions, ask questions about anything.
Okay, so he's